Hey, it's Gary Auerbach again, and I'm here in the garden of the Espresso Bar and Cafe. Happy birthday to those folks. I just learned that they've been here for 6 years, which is totally awesome, and their back garden is really nice. I'm here today with Howard Means, and Howard has a new book out. I think it came out earlier this year, maybe a month or so ago, and he lives over in Millwood, Virginia. And he's going to be at Hanley Library in the downstairs auditorium, which I just absolutely love. And it's going to happen Wednesday night. Howard, first of all, good morning. How are you? Thanks
Fine,
for coming
thank
out.
you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, have you been to the Espresso Bar and Cafe before?
I've never been here before. The cappuccino, I highly recommend. It was really good. And
Okay.
The cupcakes were spectacular, and they were free, at least today.
Free cupcakes because it's their birthday, and apparently a new bakery is going in around the corner. We learned about that, or over on Cameron Street, which is really cool. This is your 11th book, is that right?
I think that's right. I have trouble with keeping count, but 11 sounds good to me.
Okay, yeah, you only have 10 fingers, so you're
Yeah,
trouble after that.
I'm in no man's land now.
Howard, it's an amazing book because it's about the what happened at Kent State in 1970, May 4th. I wasn't 4 years old then, but there's a lot to be said about the history and what really happened there. And is that what you're going to be talking about? And tell me about how your book is different from other accounts now.
Well, it is what I'm going to be talking about. There's a little slideshow I open with, which sort of sets the stage for and reminds people of exactly what happened. My book is different, I think, because my book had no agenda to begin with.
Okay.
There are only 2 or 3 books about the subject. There have been some documentaries, but they're generally told through the same 5 or 6 sets of eyes. It's kind of as if people had claimed proprietary control over the story. When I set out to do this, I discovered a cache of 130 plus oral histories in the Kent State University archives. And so I have this incredible bank of memory that I'm working from to try to tell the story from, I guess the word's holistic point of view, from a 360-degree perspective. And in a way, the book, in a way, for me, has been a tour through their sorrow. And I sort of feel like I'm channeling their memories as I tell this story. But I think it's an important story to tell. And I don't think it's a dated story per se. I mean, this was a key turning point in the history of political protest, campus protest in America. Jim Rhodes, the governor of Ohio, when the protests started at Kent State in May 1, 1970, the next day, May 3rd it was, he said, we're not going to treat the symptoms, we're going to eradicate the problems.
Right.
He brought the National Guard in force with disastrous results.
So 4 people were killed, is that right? I mean, I know the history from the song 4 Dead in Ohio, and there's been many other songs.
4 killed, 9 wounded.
9 wounded.
1 paralyzed from the waist down for life.
And when you talk about the recorded oral histories, were you listening to hours and hours of
Hours and hours.
of tape?
They've done transcripts too, so you can do it either way.
Right.
One of the beauties of this was it's all available online.
Okay.
I spent days and days in the archives for other reasons. They have great files.
At Kent State?
At Kent State, and also at Yale. There's the repository of the legal history of all this happens to be there because that's where the American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio deposited it.
Wow.
Because they didn't trust having it in Ohio State Library, which was in any library in the state. Actually, they deposited it at Princeton. Princeton lost it, and somebody found it, or just forgot about it. Somebody found it and transferred it to Yale.
Wow,
So,
wow. And I know just because the political times now, certainly very different, and I didn't think I was going to get into this, but there is a lot of issues now with people supporting the blue, and supporting the people. How have things changed since Kent State days?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the lesson of Kent State is that in some ways things haven't changed. And what happened at Kent State was it began as a protest against the Vietnam War. The National Guard comes in a massive force. They have, there are probably 30 or 50 dedicated protesters, and hundreds of students being drawn into this by the protest, but really 30 to 50 people, hardcore protesters. The National Guard response is to come in with a maximum of 1,300 people. They've got armored personnel carriers. They have tanks. They have helicopters all over the place. They're dropping tear gas from helicopters. And it turns the protest ultimately from the Vietnam War to the presence of the National Guard itself.
Oh.
And so on Monday at noon, when the students and the National Guard face off at either end of this grassy commons in the middle of the Kent State campus, it's about the Guard. It's not about the Vietnam War anymore. And the Guardsmen, I'll come to this in a second, the Guardsmen are doing crowd control with tear gas, bayonets, and M1s. M1's a battle rifle, lethal to half a mile. And so really when things get very hairy on the backside of this Blanket Hill, where the shooting takes place, all the Guardsmen have, by then they've exhausted basically all their tear gas, because it's a 17 mile an hour wind that's blowing all the tear gas away and inflaming the people on the hillside that are just watching the whole thing. So what they have at that point is a battle rifle to control a crowd with, which is insane. All you can do is blow a hole in somebody. So the reason I get into that in your previous question was, I think we're seeing the same thing now, the militarization of civilian conflicts. You saw it at Ferguson, you see it in Baltimore. The Pentagon surplus program, arming police forces around the country with weapons that were originally made for going door to door in Kabul and places like that.
Right.
You understand why the police want to have all this protection. You sympathize with that. But that said, it turns it into a different kind of conflict, the over-militarization of response to civilian discord.
Have you had a chance to share this book with, I don't know if to say survivors or witnesses from Kent State, National Guard, other police forces, anything like that?
I've been doing a lot of talking about the book, and when I was out in Ohio a couple weeks ago, there were Kent State students from people who'd been on the field of conflict. There was a guardsman there. There were there were townspeople there, and all these people play into the story. I mean, what happened at Kent State was both, in a way, inevitable. All the toxic rivers of the 1960s, the assassinations, the protests, they all flowed together this one place in Northeast Ohio. So in a way, you can look at it and say, oh, this is just, and it was going to happen somewhere. It happened at Kent State. But then if you break it down, and I think my book does this in a way nobody else has ever done it, if you break it down, every player in this, to every party to this, the governor's office, the National Guard, the university administration, the students, the mayor of the town, they all could have done something different. They all could have prevented it. Nobody had a plan B. Everybody had a plan A.
Right.
But when the plan A failed, nobody had a fallback plan. And that's when things, that's when disaster struck.
Right, and disasters do strike, and those kind of things. Whether it's mismanagement or somebody had a role to play, could have been handled differently. It's all hindsight, right?
Disaster strike, but when disaster strikes, when you're holding a battle rifle in your hand, and it's lethal to half a mile, then there's a lot of collateral damage that doesn't have to happen.
Sure.
None of it had to happen.
Right.
Nobody who was shot was literally, physically threatening the life of a guardsman. There's no question about that. There was, there was a lot of speculation. The National Guard, the Ohio National Guard, claimed initially that there was sniper fire. There's never been any evidence, convincing evidence of any sniper fire. So people start firing, and the first person, a guy named Doug McKenzie, I think his name, Douglas McKenzie, is the furthest guy hit. He's 230 yards away from where the guardsmen are firing, 2.5 football fields away. He shot through the back of the neck. The bullet misses his spine by an inch and exits through his jaw. And he wasn't, he was doing nothing. He was nowhere near the thing. There are too many incidents like that where people were just. Sandy Shure, who was killed by a bullet to the jugular vein, she was walking between classes.
Wow.
That's the heartbreak of this whole thing.
Right,
complete heartbreak. And I find when I talk about it, after all this time of writing about it and researching, I still get choked up when I talk about it. I can't help, because it's so senseless. It shouldn't have happened.
I saw something, Howard. I just want to ask you quickly how people responded or asked, or
Yeah.
with the president at the time, and he came out to speak with students or protesters.
The president is a guy named Robert White, who everybody says was a prince of a guy. He sort of led by committee.
He was the president of Kent State.
I'm sorry, Kent State University. He led by committee, but he was not the man for the time. At the time, there was this conflict at noon on Monday, May 4, that eventually ended up in the shootings 24 minutes later. But the president of the university should have been standing there between the students and the National Guard. He was off with all his top administrators having lunch at that time, making plans for what to do when the National Guard left. He should have been in the field of conflict. He should have been in the middle of it. It wasn't his way. It wasn't the kind of person he was. But it's a damn shame he wasn't there.
So even that's kind of one of those lessons, that leadership
absolutely.
needs to be there.
Absolutely, yeah.
As
somebody said to me, you got to defend your campus, even though it's a state campus, even though the governor is ultimately in charge. You got to defend it. You owe your students that.
Are there any stories that you know about, Howard? And I'm not just looking for the feel-good idea, but where amends have really been made between people who are there, witnesses, and is there support groups? I mean, even like the guardsmen, I think are also, they carry it with them. Other people carry it with them. Are there some sort of memorials, tributes?
Yes, there are. There's the university for many, many years tried to run away from the memory of this.
Right.
And the students wouldn't let them. And finally, about 6 years ago, they built a May 4 Visitor Center right where the conflict took place.
Wow.
It's a spectacular small museum. It should have been done years before, but it's been done now.
You've spent some time there.
Yeah. There's a great walking tour narrated by Julian Bond, which gives you the whole feel it gives you an entire feel for it. The people I really feel worst for in some ways, and this is kind of a surprise for the book, are the guardsmen themselves. These were, people, in many cases, they were the same age as the students. They were people who were earning some extra money. They were avoiding service in Vietnam, frankly, by guard duty. But they were sent out with the wrong weapons to do an impossible job and with very poor training to do the job they were called upon to do. And a lot of them have suffered for many, many years as a result. And you can see that. I say there was a lot of court cases. The court cases, dragged on for a dozen years. And if you read their depositions, and a lot of them were deposed 3, 4, 5 times, you feel the sort of pain growing almost instead of ebbing. The first couple of times they're deposed, you can hear that they're saying what they were told to say by their National Guard commanders.
Right.
As they get away from that, you just sort of feel it coming out in their depositions. And that too. I mean, there's a lot of things here that break your heart, and that's one of the things that really broke my heart, to read those depositions.
Howard, amazing that you've done all this work to create a book to share these stories. The book's called 67 Shots, and then there's a little more to it, right?
67 Shots, Kent State, and the End of American Innocence.
Okay, and you'll be talking about that tomorrow night at Hanley Library, Wednesday, June 1st. I think it starts at 7 o'clock.
Starting at 7.
I know the book gallery, I interviewed Christine Patrick the other day. Right. She'll be there with copies of the book for sale, which I suppose you'll sign if people want.
I'll be only too glad to sign, yeah.
And
I'll sign all night if people line up.
Okay, and I mean, you're open, there's a Q&A, is that part of the discussion?
Yeah.
Great.
I don't see, the evening will not take more than an hour, I don't think. And I have a little presentation, go about 40 minutes.
Okay.
And then we'll throw it open to questions and comments.
Well, I'm going to be there. I'm going to share this, obviously, and I hope you do. I know folks from the library will share it. Maybe the book gallery too, so hopefully we'll get a nice crowd for you here at the Winchester Hanley Library. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks very much.
All right, that was fun.
So long.
And this was a little longer than I thought, but it was very interesting, so we'll see you soon.